So we have to remember that because we who are here are very fortunate that we got a chance to go to high school to be preparados, no? But that doesn't mean that our parents, or maybe the people that work at the school, the janitors, or at your schools over there, the people that work in the cafeteria, and the farm workers that are out there every day picking our food, it doesn't mean que no están educados, okay? It doesn't mean que no están educados. They are not maybe preparados because they didn't get that opportunity to go to school like we did. So we always have to respect them, and just because we do get the chance to go to school doesn't mean that we're better than other people, right? It doesn't mean that. And so we have to respect them and honor them for the work that they do. Because when you think about our country, and you know, we are the richest country in the world, the United States of America, and we have to think about who creates the wealth. ¿Quién hace la riqueza del país? It's the people that work with their hands. It's the people that work with their hands. It's the campesinos that pick our food out there in the cold, like right now, in the pruning and the planting that they're doing, or in the summertime when they're harvesting the food in the hot sun. It's the people that make our clothes, the people that build our buildings, you know, the people that make our cars. These are the people that create the wealth. Es la gente que hace la riqueza, la gente que trabaja con sus manos. And I always like to say to people, now, if you had to be on a deserted island, like, you know, that television series Survivor, and if they told you, you're going to be on this deserted island, but you can only take one person with you, who would you take? An attorney or a farm worker? I think the answer is pretty clear, right? The answer is pretty clear. And we say that, and now that when I say that, that doesn't mean that I don't think that we should go to school. Yeah, we need to go to school. We need to be preparados because we know, especially in this country, it's very hard to survive if you do not have an education. But when we go to school, we have to think about why am I going to go to college? Why am I going to finish high school? Because we do want to be able to get a better job and to be able to live a comfortable life in the United States. But we shouldn't think that I just want to go to school to become a millionaire, you know? Forget that. Because I don't care how much money you have, you can only eat 3 meals a day. Only 3 meals a day. You can only wear 1 suit of clothes a day, okay? No matter how much money you have. So what you have to think about in my life that I have on this earth, and we think about Cesar Chavez, and this is what Cesar Chavez was in his life, what can I do to make life better for other people? When I leave this earth, and I know that you're all very young, and you're going to think you're going to live forever, but you're not. Hate to tell you that, okay? Hate to break that news to you. But when I leave this earth, what did I do in my life to make life better? So in our materialistic society that we have, we think, well, I want to get rich and I want to buy a lot of stuff, right? And you know, in our country, we buy so much stuff that we have to get a storage shed, you know, to put our stuff in. And then we have to buy a yard sale to get rid of the stuff that we've already got. And the thing is, when you die, you can't take it with you. You've never seen a hearse, you know, a funeral car with a U-Haul behind it with your stuff, no? Never. So when we leave this earth, what we want to do, we want to leave a legacy of justice. Cuando nos morimos, queremos dejar una legada de justicia. Because when we leave a legacy of justice, nobody can take it away from you. Just like knowledge. Everything that you learn, no te lo pueden robar. Everything that you learn is your treasure, and nobody can steal that from you. Because we see many families that somebody dies, and then they leave money, or they leave property, or they leave jewels, And everybody starts fighting over that, right? Everybody wants some of the money or some of the property, la casa, están peleando por la casa, o lo que dejaron atrás, So we don't want that, because we want to leave a legacy of justice. And that means that when you grow up and you have your families and you have your children, your grandchildren, they're going to remember the legacy of justice that you left, just like we are celebrating Cesar Chavez. That's why we're celebrating Cesar Chavez, because he left a legacy of justice. When Cesar died, and by the way, he died a very peaceful death, regardless of what people tell you, when he died, he had a brochure in his hand of Indian jewelry. He wanted to help the indigenous people. And when he died, he still had that piece of paper in his hand. He still had his glasses right here on his nose, okay? He died a very, very peaceful death. And that's why we remember Cesar, because of everything that he did on this earth to make life better for other people, especially for the farm workers. So when we celebrate Cesar, we celebrate his values, the values that he had, And of course, one of those values that he had was of nonviolence. He believed, like Gandhi, like Dr. Martin Luther King, that we could really change the world without using violence. And the thing that we had to do is just come together, work together, and we could make it happen. So when he died, his annual salary was $6,000 a year. Because in the union, when I belonged to the union, we all worked, and nobody really got paid. We got $10 a week, and the union paid all of our expenses. If somebody got sick, they had to go to the doctor, the union took care of them. But we didn't really have any money in hand. All of the money that we were able to raise went back to the organization so we could hire people and organize more workers. And I do have to tell you that the conditions for the farm workers were very, very bad. They worked the sol a sol, from sun up to sundown, without any kind of a rest period. We did not have water for the workers out there in the hot sun. No tenían agua fría, they didn't have cold water. They didn't have bathrooms for the women, especially. And as you know, here in Oregon, it's the same thing. You have these fields that are many miles outside of the city, and there's no place to go to the toilet. There's no toilets. And so the women, they had to get a blanket or shirts to hide them when they went to the bathroom. These are inhumane conditions. And why do they do that? Because if they made the workers think that they were not human, because if you don't give people water and you don't give people toilets, it's like people aren't human. And that way it was easier to them to oppress the people, because they didn't give them the bare necessities. So when we think about the things that we fought, it was just to get those basic human rights for farm workers, to treat them like they were human beings, not animals. And it took a lot to be able to do that. And so Cesar said from the beginning, we're not going to use violence, and we didn't, even when we had people killed. We had 5 people killed in the farm workers movement, just so farm workers could get the right to organize and get those basic human conditions. Our first martyr was a young Jewish girl named Ann Friedman, and she was run down by a truck in a sugarcane field in Florida. She was only 18 years old, the age of some of you in this room. Our second martyr was a young Arab, Naji Daifala, and he was killed by a sheriff who hit him on the back of the head with a big flashlight. Naji was a very slight person, about my size, and actually smaller than me. And then after they hit him, the sheriff hit him with the flashlight on the back of the head. They dragged him on the gutter, on the curbs, hitting his head, and he died of a concussion. And within 24 hours after Naji was killed, they killed Juan de la Cruz. And he was standing on the picket line with a flag in his hand, and this labor contractor came by and shot him in the heart. Shot him in the heart, Juan de la Cruz. He was about 50 years old. Naji was only 21. But then we had 2 other martyrs. We had another martyr, Rufino Contreras, and he went into the field in the Imperial Valley. It was a lettuce strike, went into the field to talk to some of the workers about why they were striking, to get a pension plan, to get a medical plan for the workers, and to get better wages. And when he walked into that field, he was met with a hail of 80 bullets. Many of the workers hit the ground, and Rufino Contreras was the only one of that group that was killed. And he left a wife, Rosa, and 2 little children. And our last martyr was Rene Lopez. He was a young man. He was barely 19 or 20 years old. And what happened when Rene was killed, we had passed a law in California, thank you, that the farm workers could organize, that they had the right to organize. So he went and he organized his company, and everybody voted for the union. And so there was a lot of celebration going on. But then the owner of the company had his brother-in-law, who had worked against the election for so the workers wouldn't vote for the union, and they had brought up this goon from Los Angeles, a Latino goon, and they called Rene over to the car. They were sitting in the car, and they called Rene over, and they said, Rene, we want to talk to you. So Rene, very innocently, he walked up to the car, he put his head up against the window, they pulled up a gun, and they shot him in the temple. And it just shot him in cold blood. And of all of those martyrs, oh, by the way, he left a wife, 18-year-old wife, and a little baby. And of all of those 5 martyrs of the union, people that gave their lives just to get the basic necessities, the same rights that other workers have. Of all of those 5 people that were killed, only one of the perpetrators went to prison, and that was the person that killed Rene Lopez, right? So when you think about why such a great sacrifice, just to get basic human rights, but that is the kind of opposition that we had. Many of us went to jail. We'd go out to the fields to talk to the workers, and they put us in jail, sometimes before we even had a chance to talk to the workers. But in spite of all of that, Cesar insisted we have to be nonviolent. We're not going to start going out and getting guns and shooting the labor contractors or shooting the growers or shooting the strike breakers that come in to break our strikes. None of that. We're going to continue to be a nonviolent movement. And when we talk about nonviolence, it's not a tactic. It's got to be a philosophy. It's got to be something that we believe in, And it's kind of hard. And of course, we know that other people besides Cesar, Mahatma Gandhi, of course, in the Bible, Jesus Christ, they say turn the other cheek. And we know it's hard to do. It's hard to do to forgive other people when they are mad at you or they offend you. But it's something that we have to kind of practice. And when Cesar talked about nonviolence, he didn't just talk about physical violence. He also talked about verbal violence. When we talk bad about other people, or when we talk bad to people, and when we use chisme, chisme, right? Chisme is very deadly. It's un veneno, it's like a poison. And so it takes a lot of discipline, because sometimes we think things, and we don't always have to say what we think if we're mad at somebody else, Sometimes we just have to kind of contain that anger and count to 10 or whatever. And we know that in many schools, and I'm sure at some of your schools also, we have what we call bullying, right? When people bully and insult other people, well, that's really verbal violence when we insult other people. And I want to mention one group in particular that unfortunately in our, especially our Latino, you might say, environment, that sometimes we insult other people because they're different. And sometimes it's a joke. Somebody has a disability, and so we kind of make fun of them, But when we think about the other part of bullying is when you isolate people. When you have somebody who might have a disability, and then nobody talks to that person, and they're isolated, they're socially isolated, and that is very hurtful. That's very hurtful. So I think that one of the things that you can do at your schools is to make sure that if somebody has a disability, and maybe they have a developmental disability, that we make it a point to reach out to that person and to talk to that person and to include them in everything that we do. And another area that we really have to think about, And again, we know that many of us in this hall, we come from different religions. And some of our religions, including my own, I'm a Catholic, okay, that sometimes we are really taught to discriminate against other people. And I'm talking about people specifically who happen to be gay, lesbian, or transgender. And so we make fun of people like that. And we shouldn't do that. Because people who are gay, lesbian, or transgender son parte de nuestra familia. They're part of our family. And so we... And so sometimes we have to talk to some of our peers, some of our friends, and maybe some of our family members, because they don't have the same kind of tradition or the same kind of conciencia, the same kind of consciousness that we have. And so what I want to share with you on that one is when we talk to our peers, our friends, our family, there is one thing that we can use to kind of teach them. And I'm going to use a phrase that was used by one of the Mexican presidents, an indigenous president from Oaxaca. His name was Benito Juárez. Okay, for those of you who don't know who Benito Juárez is, he was the president of Mexico after they got the independence from Spain, right? And he had a very famous saying. He had a very famous saying, and I'm going to say it in Spanish. And we can use, lo que dijo Benito Juárez, what he said when we talk to other people about respecting other people's rights. He said, el respeto al derecho ajeno es la paz, right? El respeto al derecho ajeno es la paz. Respecting other people's rights is peace. So, who you love, who you live with, who you marry, even if it happens to be a person of the same sex, that is your business, right? And nobody else's business. Nobody else's business. And you know, a lot of the haters out there, you know who they are. The haters out there, what do? They attack people of the gay, lesbian, transgender community. They attack women, women's right to choose, women's right for their own reproductive rights, women's right to abortion. They attack immigrants, right? They attack because they're undocumented. They attack labor unions. And they really don't care very much about the environment. You know, they say there's no global warming. Those are the haters. Those are the haters out there. And when it comes to women's reproductive rights, I want to say this. I am the mother of 11 children, okay? But in a little while, I'm going to introduce you to my daughter, Juanita. Juanita has 3 dogs. She's not going to have any children, okay? Her babies are Sancho, that's one of the dogs' name, Sancho, Paca, and Samantha, okay? Those are her 3 dogs. And so again, lo que dijo Benito Juárez, okay? Respect my right to have 11 children. I don't think too many people out there want to have that many kids. And also respect my daughter's right to only have 3 dogs. That's what this is all about, no? It's respecting other people's rights. So we have to remember that. And as long as we're talking about women's rights, I just want to have a message out here for the women, okay? For the women. First of all, we know that we as women, we are not represented the way that we should be in government. We saw a lot of our great student leaders out here this morning, but when we come to the U.S. Congress, right now, we women, we're only about maybe 18%. Now women, we are over half of the population. You know, women, we're the majority of the population. But when we look at government, we're not there. 18% in the U.S. Congress, and I don't know what your state legislature looks like here in Oregon. In California, we're doing a little bit better. We're probably about 25% of the state legislature. So at the rate that we're going, it's going to take us over 200 years for women to have parity, to have equality in the Congress. And that's really important because the people that are in here in, let's see, Portland, I guess that's your state capital here? Yeah? Oh, Salem, I'm sorry. In Salem, and the people that are in Washington, D.C., they make the decisions for us. They decide how our money is going to be spent. And so we know, like President Obama said, we should have a lot of money for childcare. Every child should be able to have an early childhood education, all the way from kindergarten, right? Free, it should be free. Families at work shouldn't have to pay so much money to have daycare for their children. But we don't have that. We don't have that. So the women want to work, but you have to worry about who's going to take care of your children. Well, if we get a lot of women in office in the Congress and over here in Salem, we could have a lot of the money that we pay in taxes go to early childhood education. So it's important who gets elected to office. Elections matter because they make the decisions where our tax dollars are going to be spent. So why don't we have more women? Okay? There was a study that was done in an Ivy League college on the East Coast, and they asked all of the men, all the male students, do you think that you're qualified to run for office? And the men said, yeah, we're qualified, right? There was 85% of the men said, yes, we're qualified. When they asked the female students the same question, only 30% of the women thought they were qualified. Why is that? You know why? Because sometimes we as women think we have to be muy preparadas. We have to be really prepared. We have to know everything before we take a new position. And men don't. They just say, hey, I'm going to do it. I'm going to learn, okay? I'll learn on the job. But there's another reason. Because you know what? We as women, we are raised to be victims. Desde que estamos chiquitas, from the time we're little girls, what do they tell us? Don't get that white dress dirty. Don't climb the tree. Don't take any risks, right? Because you might fall down and hurt yourself, you know? Are you wrestling with your brother or your sister? That's not ladylike. We're told somebody's going to protect you, somebody's going to take care of you, you know? Somebody's going to support you. And we believe that. And think of the animal kingdom. Between the lions and the tigers and all those animals out there, who are the most ferocious and the strong, the male or the female? Because they have to take care of the babies, right? So, ¿qué pasó con nosotras? You know, what happened to us? It's the way that we are raised. We're taught to think that we can't take care of ourselves, that somebody's going to take care of us. And then we're told by Walt Disney, Sleeping Beauty, don't worry about a thing, because there comes Prince Charming on his horse, and he's going to give you a big old beso, a big old kiss. And you're going to wake up and you're going to live happily ever after. You know what? He doesn't exist, okay? So instead, you're going to have a pretendiente, a pretender Prince Charming, who's going to come. Ladies, think about this. He's going to give you a kiss, going to put you to sleep, and then baby's daddy's gone. Baby's daddy is gone. ¿Dónde se fue? ¿Dónde se fue? And left a young lady with a baby, okay, to take care of, no? Or as women get older, they get traded in for a trophy wife. Looks like the first wife, but 20 years younger, no? So what this means is that, ladies, we have to remember that we have to be able to finish school. We have to think about what kind of career we're going to have, what kind of a job am I going to have, you know? So because we know that we have to take care of ourselves. Remember that. We have to take care of ourselves. And to all the educators in the room, I want to say we have to change the way that we educate our women. Our women have to be educated so that they know that they have skills, that they have self-confidence, that they can take care of themselves. Coretta Scott King said once that we will never have peace. This is Dr. Martin Luther King's widow. She said we will never have peace in the world until women take power. So we, women, we have to take power. And you have to believe in yourself. And I want to say this to everybody in the room, because folks of color, we have the same problem too, men and women, right? Believe in yourself. Don't let anybody take your work away from you. When you do something, put lights around it, pound the drums, okay? Let everybody know I did it, so that somebody didn't take credit for your work, okay? And have confidence in yourself, and don't let other people take away from you what you want to do in your life. Think about what you like to do, what you love to do, and go for it. Don't just think about money, okay? Think about what do I love to do, and how could I, because when we do what we love to do, then we're going to be happy in life. And sometimes people put obstacles in our way, so we can't do that. And of course, you have to finish school. You have to finish school. You have to finish school. And sometimes we have, life gets in the way, but you know that saying, that song, El Rey, que dice, no hay que llegar primero, pero hay que saber llegar, right? No hay que llegar primero, pero hay que saber llegar. So if life gets in the way and you are unable to finish school and you have to drop out for a little while, come back, come back. You know, I went back to college when I was like already 25 years old. I finished high school, I was in college, but I did a foolish thing. I got married too young, and then I ended up getting a divorce, you know, at the age of 25, but I went back to college at the age of 25. My father, Juan Fernandez, although I was not raised with my father, I was raised with my mother. My dad was abusive, so my mother left him. But my dad always wanted to have a college education. He was 55 years old when he got his college degree. 55 years old. And as you're going through school, you know, sometimes we don't know stuff. We don't know things. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Sometimes we think que tenemos un orgullo falso, you know. We think we have a lot of pride, and we're afraid to ask for help. Because we say, oh, if I ask for help, they're going to think I'm dumb. Well, you know what? We learn something new every single day. Every single day we learn something new. I am going to be 85 years old in a couple of weeks, right? And on this trip here to Oregon, with the wonderful people, the founders of the César Chávez Leadership for Students, mis amigos aquí, Sonny Montes and Jose Romero, they've been teaching me a lot of stuff that I didn't know, right? So we all learn things every single day. So don't be afraid to ask for help. One of my sons, who is now a doctor, Dr. Fidel Huerta, you know, because we traveled around so much with the union, and we were in New York City on the boycott, and we were in Chicago, and we were in Florida, and we traveled, and my son Fidel and my other son Emilio, who's now an attorney, okay, they got way behind in their classes. So I had to get tutors to volunteer that they would catch them up so that they could finish school. But they finished. So when you're trying to get help for whatever you need, if it's a class that you need help on, don't be afraid, or no tengan vergüenza to ask for help, because somebody will help you. And the first person that you go to may not help you, but the second person or the third person, somebody out there will help you. So always, and don't feel like you're pestering people. You're doing them a favor, okay? You're doing them a favor. When you're asking them to help you, you are doing them a favor. So don't be afraid to ask for help, because if we do ask for help, that's the way that we are able to finish school. I also want to say, I'm going to use the F word, feminist. Because a feminist is a person who cares about workers' rights, labor unions, a person who cares about the environment, who cares about women's rights, who cares about immigrants' rights, who cares about LGBTQ rights, okay? And the reason I like to use that word feminist is because that means that all the men in the room can also be feminists. All the men in the room can be feminists. And I want to say to the young men, in this hall today, please, all you young men, look at every woman as if she were your sister or your mother. And also, to the young men and some of the young women also, go to your mother or your grandmother or tu tia and say, if you don't know how to cook, tell them, please show me how to cook. One of my other sons, Vicente, is a chef. He's the best cook in the family. And he went to school to become a chef. Because all the young men need to know that today's women, hey, we're not going to do your laundry, right? Y no te vamos a planchar la ropa tampoco, you know? And we're not going to pick up for you. So, all of the young men, and by the way, some of you may have to tell your mothers that. To young men, you have to learn how to take care of yourselves also. And also, you have to learn how to dance, all right? And I think dancing is very, very important. And I'll tell you why. Because as you get older, what happens is your legs give out, you know? They're kind of the first to go. But if you learn how to dance and you dance a lot, you make your legs strong, right? And so when people ask me, okay, from here I'm going to go to Selma, Alabama, because they're going to celebrate the 50th anniversary of a march across the bridge. I don't know how many of you have seen the movie Selma. If you haven't seen it, go see that movie, where people were beaten up. African-American people were trying to get the right to vote. And they finally passed the Voting Rights Act in Washington. So I'm going to be there on that march. I was there 2 years ago because they dedicated that march to the immigrants. And I marched 22 miles. 22 miles. So when people ask me, how can you how can you do those marches? You know why? Because I like to dance. So we do this for our health. We do this for our health. The other thing that I want you to know about Cesar Chavez, and it's something that applies to us today, I talked about going to Selma. I said I'm going there. From here, I'm going to fly over there. Because voting is so important. The people, people died. Young people like yourselves were killed. They were killed in Mississippi. 3 young men, Schwerner, Goodby, and Cheney, were killed because they were trying to register people to vote. And right now, it's so important that we vote. Because we Latinos, we are 52 million in the United States of America. 52 millones. But unfortunately, many of us do not vote. And that is really bad. You all know what's going on in Washington right now. President Obama, he gave an executive action. He said for the dreamers, he said, if you came to the United States when you were a kid, and even though you're undocumented, you can go to school. And he passed that law. He did it on his own. It didn't go through the Congress. And then recently, he said, if you're undocumented and you have children that are born here, you can get a work permit, you know? You can get a work permit. And we were supposed to start taking applications on the 19th of February. Pero ¿qué pasó? The Republicans in the Congress are stopping that. They're stopping that from happening. And down in Texas, they went to court and they got a judge in Texas in Brownsville to stop that, to get a stay on it. So now Obama and the Department of Justice, they're appealing that decision so they can start taking the applications. This is nothing new. When people say to us, the people who are here coming to the United States, you know what? We have to remind them that this has always been the policy of the United States. This is a country of immigrants, and every single person that came here, unless they were Native American, they came from somewhere, no? They came from somewhere. And every single immigrant group that came to the United States, they were given citizenship and the right to vote. In fact, way back in the 1920s, there were more foreign-born, gente de afuera, aquí en Estados Unidos, here in the United States, than people that were native-born. There was a majority, and they could vote without becoming citizens. That was then. So this is nothing new. When we say we want immigration reform, that we want citizenship for everybody, no es una cosa nueva. It's always been like that. And in fact, when they tell us as Latinos, go back where you came from, we have to tell them, hey, we are where we came from. We didn't cross the border crossed us. Can we say that? So let's say it all together. We didn't cross the border crossed us. Let's say it. We didn't cross the border crossed us, okay? Because we are the indigenous people of the Americas, and we were here saying to all the Europeans, bienvenidos, okay? Welcome. Anyway, so I'd like to go into the whole thing about why so many people have come from Mexico and Central America. I don't know if I have time to do all of that. How's my time going? I'm okay? Okay. One of the reasons that so many people come from Mexico and Central America is because in the United States, after we passed the last amnesty bill in 1986, La Amnistía that we passed then, you know, we got about a few million people then that got their legalization, and they didn't get work permits. They got legalization, okay? They actually got that. So what happened after that? The U.S. Congress passed a bill called NAFTA, the Free Trade Agreements. What did that mean? That meant that companies from the United States could go into Mexico and into Central America to set up their corporations, to set up their businesses. El maíz, where did the corn come from? The maíz is from Mexico. That's where the maíz came from. But now there is more corn from the United States that goes into Mexico than what they grow in Mexico. You know why? Because our tax dollars, what we pay in taxes, makes the corn from the United States cheap. So corn from Kansas and Iowa and Illinois, all that corn goes to Mexico. What happens to the Mexican farmers, con los campesinos de Mexico? They're not big, giant agribusiness. They only have their families, maybe 10, 20 workers that they have on their corn farms. So they can't compete. They can't compete with the big, giant agribusiness farms that we have in the United States. So what's going to happen so when we talk about the 11 million people undocumented, a lot of them, or most of them, are the small farmers from Mexico and Central America. And then we have the big box stores like Walmart. By the way, everybody, friends don't let their friends shop at Walmart, all right? Because Walmart goes into Mexico and Central America, and the people who had their little tienditas, you know, they had their little stores over there, the mom and pop stores, they're put out of business. Because a little mom and pop store, they can't compete with big, giant Walmart. So they're put out of work. So where are they going to come? To the United States. And then you have the maquiladoras. These are big, giant factories that go from the United States and other countries, and they go again into Mexico and Latin America. And they put thousands of people out of work. Okay? In Juarez, Mexico, a few years ago, from one day to the next, all of the maquiladoras that were there, they went to China. But they went to Mexico first and then to China. 80,000 people were put out of work. Where did they come? To the United States. So we have to change those policies so that we in the United States can use our technology and our skills to help other countries and not take over their economy. I call it economic colonization. What happened in the United States, and I'm sure most of you were taught in your classes about World War II, how we defeated Japan and Germany. And then after we won those wars, we gave them a lot of money. The United States, we gave money to Japan, we gave money to Germany, so they could make their corporations strong. So you know Toyota, you know Sony, Mitsubishi, Honda, all of those corporations were made strong with money here from the United States, taxpayers' money. And then we said to them, you know what, don't pay us back, just keep the money. But we don't do that with Mexico and Latin America. We go in there and we put American companies and we take over the country economically. And that is why people have to leave. So we have to change that policy to say, we in the United States, we need to use our skills, our technology to make those countries strong so that they don't have to leave their beautiful countries like Oaxaca, Guatemala, Jalisco, Michoacán, to come here to the United States. Tenemos que cambiar todo eso. And the problem is that if countries that don't want to go along with us, with our free trade agreements, we make them our enemies, like Venezuela. Venezuela, Hugo Chavez, he said, the oil of Venezuela belongs to the people of Venezuela. And he kicked out the oil companies. And that's why the United States doesn't like Hugo Chavez, que descanse en paz, because he died. And what did they do with the oil money? They put in clinics, they built housing. The women in Venezuela get a check every month, even if they don't work, okay? In Cuba, do you know that, Cuba's a little teeny country, and thank God Obama just said we're gonna open up relationships with Cuba. In Cuba, every single person has a free college education. Free college education, okay? Every single person has free medical care in Cuba. There's a doctor and a nurse in every neighborhood in Cuba. So the question that we have to ask ourselves, Cuba's a little teeny country, son muy pobres. Toilet paper is a luxury in Cuba, So if that little country is so poor because we have an economic boycott on Cuba that, Cuba's only 90 miles from the U.S. Border, but if Cuba, so poor as they are, and they have this economic boycott on them, how can they give all of their people a free education? How can they do that? And we, the richest country in the world, cannot give our people a free education, okay? So at some point in time, and we're going to go back to the voting, we have to think about this. What can we do eventually to make sure that every single person in the United States of America has a free college education, okay? A free college education. And by the way, right now in the Congress, they are talking about doing free trade agreements in Asia. And what does that mean? More jobs will be taken out of the United States and shipped to Asia. And I think your senator, I'm going to say it now, your Senator Ron Wyden he's a congressman, I guess, Ron. Is he a senator now? He's a senator. Okay. Your Senator Ron Wyden, he is all for this free trade agreement stuff. So I'm going to suggest when you go back to your schools that you do a little email campaign and you do a little postcard campaign, make some postcards up and send them to Ron Wyden and say, vote against the Pacific Free Trade Agreement, okay? Can you do that? Yeah, yes, we can do that. So many of you are going to be turning 18 years old pretty soon if you're not already there, by the time you graduate or shortly after you graduate. So I want to make sure that every single person registers to vote. Because like I said before, we may be 50 million in the country, pero si no estamos registrados, si no estamos organizados, if we're not registered to vote, if we're not organized, we are invisible. And in fact, the people that are the haters are the ones that are going to get elected, the people that are not for immigration reform, the people that are not for a safe environment, they're going to be the ones that are against immigrants, they're the ones that are going to get elected. So we have the power, because of our numbers, to make sure that we get good people elected. And those of you that you're not old enough to vote, or you're not a citizen yet and you can't vote, you can also help, okay? Pueden ayudar. In the farm workers movement, this is what we did. And in my own organization, the Dolores Huerta Foundation, our people have gotten themselves elected to the school board, to the water board, to the city council. One city council, they took it over, and most of them are under the age of 25 years old. Tan jovencitos, no? So we have the power, but we've got to go out there and we've got to make sure it happens, that we go out there and we do the work to make it happen. Because if we don't do that, we're not going to get immigration reform. They're going to go against the labor unions, and if we don't have labor unions, we don't have a middle class. If we don't have a middle class, we don't have a democracy. Think about this. There was a Spanish philosopher, Jose Ortega y Gasset, and he said, when you do not have an educated citizenry, when people are not engaged politically, you have mob rule, right? And what is mob rule? When the greedy people and the haters and the people that have all of the money, when they take control of a country, that's what happens. And that's what's happening here in the United States of America. In this last election, we saw that many of the corporations put in a lot of money to elect the people that they wanted, and they won. You know how they won? Because our people didn't vote. Por eso ganaron. And we can't allow that to happen, because we need money for your education, we need money for health care, and we can't let those people win that are going to give the money away to their wealthy friends. Do you know that right now, in the United States of America, 400 individuals, 400 persons, they have more money than 1,500,000 of us, okay? 400 people have more money than 1,500,000. When they talk about the 1%, this is wrong. We should share the resources of the country. It's not right that just a few people have all of the wealth and that other people are struggling just to put food on the table. And we have the power to change that. But we have to do it in a nonviolent way. We have to do it through a democratic way. And the only way we can do that in this country is by voting. So that's why I'm going to ask all of you to be aware of this. You know, check out the evening news. Check out Jon Stewart, Amy Goodman, not the corporate media. Check out the alternative media and find out what's going on. And I know it's hard because you're all in school and you have to study, but we can do it because, you know what? We have the power. So, okay. You know, when we started organizing the farm workers, people would say to us, how are you going to organize them? Son pobres. They don't have money. They don't speak English. They're not citizens. But what we said to the workers, you have power. And the power is in your person. The power is in your person. And this is all the power that you need. But you can't do it by yourself. We've got to come together and we have to take direct action. And this is how we make the changes. So we got the toilets in the fields. We got the drinking water for the farm workers. We got the laws passed in California so workers could organize. And by the way, those toilets that we got and the drinking water, it's also in the state of Oregon and throughout the United States of America, you know? And the farm workers did it. Once they realized that they had the power, they went on strike, they went on marches, they went on boycotts, asking people to boycott products so that they could get what they needed. So we know that we have the power, right? We have the power. So I'm going to ask all of you, I'm going to shout it out there, and I'm going to say to you, who's got the power? And I want you to say, we've got the power, okay? As individuals, cada persona, el poder está en nuestro cuerpo de cada uno de nosotros. So I'm going to shout it out there, who's got the power? And I want you to shout back, we've got the power. And when I say what kind of power, I want you to say people power, all right? Can we do that? Y vamos a hacerlo recio. Okay. Who's got the power? What kind of power? Who's got the power?